Hello everyone, today we're going to be looking at thermoregulation in endotherms. So let's start off by talking about what an endotherm is. Endotherms are organisms that generate body heat through their own metabolic processes. So think birds and mammals are the main examples, and then ectotherms are things that rely on external heat processes. Now, endotherms, think humans, cows, mammals, birds, they're the main examples. Ectotherms are sometimes referred to as cold-blooded, so that's things like reptiles, snakes, and things like that. Okay, so endotherm equals produces own heat. Okay, but how does it do this? How does it maintain its internal heat? Well, there's a few different things. So we're going to have a look at the structural features first. So endotherms have this thing called brown adipose tissue. Now that's just also called brown fat. Now what it is, it's a specialized type of fat that is only found in endotherms, particularly in newborns and animals that hibernate. So brown adipose tissue contains a high density of mitochondria, and it has a protein called thermogenin. Okay, so because it has thermogenin, it uncouples the electron transport chain from ATP synthesis. Rather than producing ATP, the energy released from cellular respiration is dissipated directly as heat. So this process is called non-shivering thermogenesis, and it's very important for heat generation in cold environments. Okay, so brown adipose tissue is high mitochondria, and it also has thermogenin, which is responsible for that non-shivering heat production. Alright, now there's also another thing called insulation. There's another structural feature. So insulation obviously reduces heat loss from the body surface to the environment. In mammals, this is referred to as fur. So we have fur as insulation, and also subcutaneous fat. So that's another reason why endotherms can maintain their own internal temperatures. And in birds, it's feathers. So there's a few different things. Insulation, fur, and it traps heat. Okay. Now, there is also some behavioral responses. So these are all examples of structural features. But there's also some behavioral things. So stuff like hibernation, as an example, or a behavioral feature that allows for body temperature, heart rate, and breathing. They're all maintained and conserve energy. Animals accumulate fat reserves prior to entering hibernation. So we've got things like hibernation. There's another behavioral feature called kleptothermy. Now all this means is it's a behavior of stealing or borrowing heat from another organism. So imagine penguins. They are huddling together, and that is to reduce the surface area that is exposed to the environment, and they share body heat. Okay, through direct contact with the warmer organisms. So kleptothermy is huddling together. Another behavioural feature is aestivation. So aestivation is basically the same as hibernation, but it occurs in response to hot or dry conditions during summer. The animal enters a dormant state to avoid heat stress and water loss when temperatures are extreme and food or water is scarce. So similar to hibernation, but it's called aestivation. Now there's also another one called torpor. Torpor is a short-term temporary state of reduced physiological activity. So it's sort of a brief version of hibernation. Alright. Now there's also some physiological mechanisms. So these are examples of behavioural. Now, physiological mechanisms, things like evaporative heat loss. So that's sweating. Okay, so primary mechanisms include sweating. Sweat glands secrete water onto the skin surface, and when that water evaporates, it takes the heat with it. So sweating is an example of a physiological mechanism. And there's also, we spoke about this a little bit before, thermogenesis, and that just refers to the generation of heat within the body. So there's shivering, thermogenesis, and then there's also non-shivering thermogenesis. And that's what we talked about before, the brown adipose tissue. So I'm just going to put thermogenesis here. We have shivering and non-shivering. Now there's also vasomotor control. Now vasomotor control refers to regulation of blood vessel diameter to control the distribution of heat within the body. So you might have heard of things like vasodilation and vasorestriction. So vasodilation is the widening of blood vessels, which increases blood flow to the periphery, outside, bringing warm blood close to the surface and therefore cooling it down. So that's body's response to overheating. Vasoconstriction, on the other hand, is when the blood vessels constrict, reduces blood flow to the skin, and it retains the warm blood closer to the center of the body, which minimizes heat loss. And that's the body's response to cold conditions. Okay, so that's vasorestriction and vasodilation. And these are examples of physiological processes. So stuff that goes on inside the body. Alright, so it's quite a lot of things to remember, but remember the main structural, behavioural and physiological processes that allow endotherms to produce their own heat and maintain that constant internal temperature.